you serious? Hello, hello, hello. Oh well, same old, same old. That should be good. How are you folks doing? I'm Bruce McDonald, and this is the Talamanca Review. It's Tuesday, the 13th of January. It's 9:35 p.m. And I'm in a pretty good mood. Um, my son will be here, well, in Costa Rica tomorrow night, but he's getting in late. Around 10:30 he flies in, so he won't get to his hotel till about midnight. And then he's getting up the next morning and he's got to buy a computer monitor, and then he's coming out here the next day. And then we're going to build the roundhouse on the reserve. And well, he's going to do it, so he's going to live on the reserve for about I don't know, depends how long it takes them to build it, 2 or 3 weeks. But it's going to be an interesting process because this is the way that they've been doing their architecture, their buildings for millennia. They do roundhouses and they don't use any nails. They tie everything together with vines. And then they do a banana leaf roof on the circular structure that goes up like an inverted ice cream cone. I really don't know how they do it, but my son's going to take a lot of pictures. Energetically, they're very beautiful buildings to pass time in. And it's something about the circular structure and something about being in an enclosed structure that's native built. And all native structures were built the same way. If you look at the teepee, um, it's another, it's the same thing. Circular structure, and your fire smoke goes out the top. But in these houses, in the wood slats, and the wood slats are vertical. They they don't have a chimney, but the smoke just goes up into the inverted banana leaf ice cream cone, and it just sits there. And when you're on a hammock looking up, it's just the whole time you're in that place, and especially when the sun goes down, you're just looking up on your back in a hammock, and the smoke is constantly moving. It almost looks like water. It's hypnotizing. But this circular structure that the natives figured out is a very beautiful structure. And so this is going to give me a place to go as well if I want to go there, even when I'm not taking tourists there. So where I live, you're leaving the world. Where they live, you're leaving my world even. It's a whole other world in there in the jungle. And the reserve is a beautiful place. You'd hardly know it's a reserve because, the families are separated by jungle, and you have to know the path to get to the next house and all that sort of stuff. So it's really something. It's exciting. It's always exciting to try something, to take a risk. It's always exciting to try to build something. I mean, even if you don't succeed. It's just, I think that's really the most exciting thing in life is to try to create something. Very good business. And what I mean by good business is it's positive life experience. Anybody who goes even overnight on the reserve and camps with us and eats with us and, meets the cable car, their lives are changed. It's a life altering experience. It really is. I'm not being hyperbolic. So my son was telling me tonight, I was talking to him on WhatsApp, and his mom doesn't really know yet that he's probably not coming back, right? Um, so he just told her he's going over to try and start this business, but it'll be at least 6 months. But I think the business will do well, and I think he'll make a nice living here. And what a great life. I mean, if he does it for 20 years, from 28 to 48, what a great couple decades, to start a family and everything. And that's what you do for a living is you take people into the jungle with the Cable Car natives. Life doesn't get any better, from my opinion. I mean, there's a lot of people who would rather, a suite at the Ritz in New York or a Hilton hotel. But for me, the natural world is my natural habitat. And you guys know why, right? It's because my secondary identity is very elemental. My primary identity is Scottish Canadian Bruce McDonald. I have a social insurance number. And then my secondary identity is what I call your cosmic identity, right? And we're all associated with a line of DNA that's not original to this planet, all of us. And so my cosmic identity is elemental. My spiritual identity is the same as everything else, soul. But my cosmic identity is very much at home in natural places. And the natural world, it works with me. Some time ago, I did a 3-part series on land and man. I talked about a lot of things. And I don't know what it is. I think maybe it was working on the Blackbird book, and then I'm going to have the Essential Alan Watt probably going up later tonight or tomorrow. I'm doing a lot of books now. And I'm reading this stuff like all day, every day in between my day job. And it's so interesting to read this stuff, you know? And I'm not trying to sell books here. I'm telling you, it is a completely different experience to buy a copy of The Essential Jordan Maxwell. It's a completely different experience than sitting down and putting a YouTube video or a Spotify podcast on and listening to him. He had a way of speaking that almost canceled himself out. It was like it was like a kind of psychic encryption where he was putting the information out and then pulling it back, like holding an ice cream cone in front of a kid and then pulling it back. 2 times I mentioned ice cream cones tonight, the roof and this. I notice little patterns like that. I might be on the spectrum. But Jordan had a way of protecting himself. And the book, it just sort of lays everything bare. And it's the same thing with Alan Watt. Now, I had no idea who Alan Watt was. And then since I started working on the book about a week ago, I've been telling people, and they go, oh, yeah, I used to listen to him all the time. And apparently he had quite a following. He died a few years ago. He died in the middle of COVID. Was a Canadian guy, Scottish, but Canadian. And, you know, what reading all of these guys has done, and the Blackbird book as well, which is up now in paperback. It's a monster of a book. monster. It's like 498 pages, but incredibly readable. If you pick it up, you won't put it down. It'll take you about a week to read it, but you'll keep reading. And as I was going through all of this material, and I mean, Blackbird, he sort of made his bones in, I guess, in around 2020, I think, and 2020 to 2022 or so is when he did his best radio work. A lot of people will come along and they'll put something out, and then once all their information is out, they run out of steam. They got nothing left to say, and but they keep broadcasting, and they sort of lose steam. And so when you're looking at one of these books, you got to find when the person hit their golden ratio. And there's various ways to do it. You can just filter their videos by popularity on whatever platform they're streaming on. That's one way. And then there's what I would just call natural discretion, meaning my own natural discretion, like this is really good. So you got Jordan Maxwell, you've got Alan Watt, and it's funny because I've done two Alan Watt books now. One is Alan Watt, and the other is Alan Watts with an S. Both Scottish guys. And I'm not referring to the guy with the S who talked about Zen Buddhism. I'm talking about the guy who played piano at the Illuminati parties, just like the character in Eyes Wide Shut. And Jordan Maxwell. And I'm going like, I'm starting to notice like all these similarities in what they're saying. And they're all talking about a world run by magic. That's basically what they're all talking about. It could be low-level magic, psychological manipulation, but that's a form of magic too. It could be high-level magic, which is so demonstrative in its manifestation that it would seem like some form of unknown science. Or just regular old magic, changing reality for their benefit, or changing the perception of reality for their benefit through any means, a lot of psychic means, a deep understanding of the human unconscious, and a deep understanding of how to weaken us. Okay? Now, the last decade or so has utterly turned my world upside down. I mean, I was already pretty out there, but not really. I was out there in terms of I had a consciousness understanding of the inherent multidimensionality of life by experience. And so I was no stranger to the idea or the concept that we live in a world where things can happen or be spoken into or be manifested in this world which defy the rational and which defy the logical. So I crossed that barrier around 17, 18 when I started meditating. And it just kept building and building and building. But I hadn't really tuned in to how much was going on in the machination of society. And that's what's changed in the last 10, 15, 20 years is, and I didn't go looking for this. It sort of came to my front door. I've never been an activist in my life. My rule in life is basically it's not my business unless it makes itself my business, right? So we have to make our truce with the world. We can't allow ourselves to become outraged about everything and go out and start screaming like a manic person at an Antifa rally. It's just insane. It accomplishes nothing, but still a lot of people do it. But if I made a deal with myself, or I came to an understanding about life in my early 20s, that if something happened, if something is brought right into my space, if I didn't manifest it by thinking about it or anything, and it comes into my space, I interpret that as the creator wanting me to deal with something. And this is what we would call service to life in 3D. I generally don't get super involved in 3D life. I'm married, have a huge family, my son's coming, uh, starting a couple businesses at the same time, getting my residency in a new country. I deal with 3D, but what I mean by this is I've never seen politics or activism or the what is it, the Tikkun Olah of the Jewish people as particularly good spiritual advice. I always had a more of a Chinese disposition to life, even before I went to Taiwan. I realized this about myself when I was in Taiwan. Bruce, you're a lot like these people. That is, you're a good person. You try to do good for everybody around you. You don't do anything horribly negative. You don't rip people off. You don't lie to people. You don't manipulate. You're a good person. And the world is the way the world is. And there's nothing you can do about it. So make the best life for yourself and the people you love that you can. And the Chinese are like that. You know, they coexist with everything. Organized crime has been a part of Chinese culture for probably over 1,000 years. 1,500 years, the triad started as a response to the tyranny of emperors, probably. And it sort of just all blends into the society, and there's nobody running around going, the mafia is in my neighborhood. Okay, this is the way it works. You got the negative, you got the positive, these people, and I've always been the same way. And I try not to judge people. Um, I try not to judge people. I don't like people who kill people. I can smell that on a person as soon as I meet them. I pretty much know if they've killed a human being. I don't know. I have this psychic sense. I don't know where I developed. Probably on the street. I met a lot of killers in my life. Now, if somebody had to take a human life and they regret it, or they got caught and they did their time, or, you know, who am I, right? I've seen enough of my past lives to know that I was no saint. So who am I to judge, right? So this is the philosophy I arrived at. So when something comes to my front door, I'm going to deal with it. And I'm going to Jason Bourne that shit because I didn't go looking for it, right? Um, Little tangent there. So back to these books, and I started to think about magic and the control of society and everything. And then this afternoon, I had a wonderful call with one of my oldest friends here in Costa Rica. I met Carla in like 2015. She worked as my personal assistant for about a year and a bit, helped me finish the project, helped Brandon. At that point, my Spanish wasn't good enough to do stuff on my own. And if you go in there speaking broken Spanish or using a phone translator, right away everything is double price at a hardware store. So Carla pretty much paid for herself. And she did everything for me. She used to get on a bus and go to another town to buy my cigars, but I paid her very well. She's an absolutely lovely woman. She's 37 now. One of the most beautiful human beings I've ever known, spiritually and physically. She's just absolutely gorgeous. Really good family. I got to know her mom and dad well, and her two sisters. And I've always liked Carla, and we've stayed in touch. And she speaks fluent English. Carla's the one who went to Canada, and when I was talking to her in Canada, she said, "Bruce, I don't want to offend you, but I think these people might be soulless." And she was being literal. She wasn't being colloquial or. speaking in any kind of cloaked vernacular or anything like that. She was being literal. And I said, Carla, I mean, I think your perception is dead on. That's why I left that country. It's when a place is dying, you see it in the people first, right? Like when a tree is sick, you see that it's not producing any fruit. The leaves are brown. You can see a brittleness to the branches as they start to thin, and that tree is sick. It's not getting enough water. The roots aren't planted. Something's wrong with that tree. Same thing with human beings. And you can see this. You can see this death in Canadians now. It's just a death. They have an almost Soviet mentality now from like 1985. If you're Canadian and you're listening to me, like uh, Carrie or Bob, I'm not trying to be offensive, but this is it. Just when you live in a place where everything's alive, you recognize when something's dying. So I was talking to Carla today, and I was telling her that Brandon's coming in tomorrow, and the business is going, and I was calling to give her an update. And I want Carla to, with Brandon and Eduardo, but I want Carla to lead certain groups for 1 or 2 days in the jungle. And these would be largely female groups. And they wouldn't be completely alone. My son will be there, and Eduardo or Ishmael will be there. Um, and I don't mean to sound, as they say over here, machista, which is male chauvinist. But I don't think a group of women should be in the jungle on their own. Um, you can call me a sexist if you want, but wait until you come here and go in the jungle to judge me, okay? You feel better with a man around. But I want Carla to lead these groups, right? Like 3, 4 women, and have this female empowerment program in my suite of packages for this business for my son. And then I also want Carla on couples trips. So it's very interesting because I'm starting this business and I'm not worried about the jungle. I'm not worried about setup, tent, food supply, cooking, snake bites, or anything. What I'm thinking about most is gender. Yeah, gender. Like, people people generally feel comfortable in certain situations. If I get 4 guys up here and they're all 30 or younger or 35 or younger, and they all go to the gym in Seattle or Toronto or LA, and they've done hiking in Colorado and uh, mountains of California and so on and so forth, then that's a trip I understand completely. My son will grab those guys and that trip will go perfectly. Where I start to think about things is where gender gets mixed up. Because if you're in the jungle for 2 days, you have to pee, you have to go number two, you have to bathe, right? And then so you start thinking, oh my God, how am I going to do this business with gender? Do I have to set up a tarpaulin where people can go in and take off their clothes and bathe with a bucket of water? And like, how do I do all this stuff? And then, would you really want a man explaining that to a woman? And then I thought, oh, I need Carla. So I spoke to her a few months ago and I said, look, this business is slowly coming together. Would you like to do female tours or couple tours? And she said, yeah, I'd love to. She's working at a daycare right now. I said, great. So I ended up calling her today and talking to her today. And she happened to say, you're very fortunate to get this permission, Bruce, from the Kabakar. And this is a very incredible thing for Carla to say. And I'll tell you why. Carla's boyfriend for the last 8 years or so, also a friend of mine and Brandon's, incredibly solid human being. His name is Ben, and he's one of the best jungle map readers in the world. he worked in Darien Gap. He lived in Darien Gap for 5 years, 25 years ago, 20 years ago. I think he's 45 or 47 now. Um, Ben has traveled the entirety of Latin America from Argentina all the way up to Belize. He has traveled the entirety of Latin America just with maps, compasses, through the jungle, and never checking in at customs. He can go. You can go through all of Latin America if you know what you're doing from the southern part of Mexico, okay? You can go all the way through Latin America and cross every national boundary and never go through a border check if you know how to go through the jungle. Isn't that the most amazing thing you've ever heard? And and Ben has done this. And Ben had been running a business in Costa Rica as well, and tourists would come from Europe and they would go into the jungle for 4 days with him. And this is a one direction trip. So they would start here and end up there. And they would go through the Talamanca Mountains. And so Ben and Carla have a very good relationship with the Quebecar as well. Now, if I were to drive to Carla's house on highways from where I am right now, it would take me about 90 minutes to get there. She's in another province, my neighboring province, but another province. Um, but when you go by the Talamanca Mountains, to walk to where Carla and Ben live in this little town in another province, it would take 4 or 5 days of walking all day, every day, and stopping an hour before the sun goes down, building your tent, building your fire, making your food, and getting on with it, right? And so the Talamancas go all the way, and it's all Quebecar country. And you're not really allowed to go back there without their permission, right? And natives in Latin America are a completely different experience than North America. Um, I always give the example of the ranch bungalow, the Ford F-150 in the parking lot, and the satellite TV dish on a typical reserve home in Canada. But here they're for real natives, cell phone natives, but they're natives. And the cell phones, they only work when they get them charged and they're within range of a signal. But back there, there's no signals for anything. Once you go in back there, you're in. Unless you have a satellite phone, you're sort of in the thick of it. So then I don't know how this started. And okay, I do remember now. So Carla was telling me this story about Ben going into the jungle with a friend of his, Miguel. And Miguel wasn't a client, Miguel was just a friend of his, another Costa Rican. And they wanted to just go on a 2 or 3 hour hike. That's it. And they went into the Talamancas from where Ben and Carla live, 90 minutes away by driving. And once you hit the mountain range back there, there's no roads, there's no nothing. It's like, I think, several thousand square kilometers of wilderness. Now remember, square kilometers, 1,000 square kilometers is only 10 kilometers by 100 kilometers, or, it's not necessarily a huge geographic area. When you square something, it sounds big, but there's thousands of square kilometers back there. And Ben is literally, and I'm not joking, he's got a couple master's degrees, super educated. Um, one of the best jungle map readers in the world. And jungle map reading is completely different because there's an element to the maps that give you all the elevations, a way of looking at the map that explains elevation. Because you can be walking through the jungle and you're just walking through, there's your machete, and you come right to a cliff and there's a 500-foot drop. And if you can't read that on the map, it's not that the cliff poses a danger, you'll see it before you fall. But holy cow, you just got to go back the 4 hours you just wasted walking up to this dead end and go back and do a U-turn. So Ben is a really competent map reader. And as I said, he's walked from Argentina all the way up to Honduras. Okay, he's been in the jungle in every country in Latin America. And on this day going into the Talamancas, he and Miguel got lost. And they were in the jungle for 14 or 15 days. And Carla said, Bruce, it was the only time Ben ever went into the Talamancas and didn't let the cable car know ahead of time. And so Carla was hinting something there, and I decided to take the bait and go a bit deeper on that topic. And I said, "What do you mean?" She says, "You got to have their permission." I said, "Well, how would not having their permission affect Ben getting lost? He's one of the best map readers in the world." And Carla said, "Well, they own that land, Bruce." She was trying to say something without coming right out and saying it. And then I said, "Carla, you know, I've been living up here in the Talamancas for 8 years now. Oh, longer now. It's 2026. I've been living up here for 9 years now. Been in Costa Rica 11." I said, "I'm very well liked by the Quebecar. They love my wife. And she's the only Tico in this pueblo they'll talk to. They pretty much ignore everybody else. And my wife has to mitigate all disputes." So I say, "Carla, what do you mean it's their land?" She said, "They control it, Bruce. They have an enchantment, a magic. I don't want you to think I'm superstitious." Carla also has a master's degree. We're talking about educated people here. And she knows I meditate, and we've had some pretty far out conversations in the past. And I taught Carla how to meditate 8 years ago, and she still meditates 30 minutes an hour a day. Isn't that amazing? And so I start to say some stuff. I say, there was a couple guys that drowned fishing a couple years ago. It was in the news. She said, "Yeah, I remember that story. That was around where you live." I said, "Yeah, they drowned in the Barbelia River," which, by the way, is very hard to do. And one of them drowned, and the other one, anyways. So the story that I heard from the natives was that the guy that drowned was killed by what they call the water tagger. And the water tiger is a spirit back there. And the water tiger is coming when you hear a loud thunder crack before rain starts. Now it sounds crazy, right? It sounds completely crazy when you think about it. But the point I'm making is we don't really understand how this reality works. And when a culture that's been living back there with nature for 10,000 years at least, okay? I mean, these people have been living back in those mountains at least 4 or 5 times longer than the time since Christ was crucified. Think about that for a moment. Are we really going to believe they don't know what's going on in their environment? They know exactly what's going on, but to understand it, you have to think multidimensionally. And that's where Carla and I really started to talk about this, because we both realized what we were talking about. Now, my wife, she swears to the point where if you laugh at her, she'll get angry. I don't laugh at her, but she swears they can shapeshift. And it happened to her once or twice when she was living up at the reserve in a wooden shack and with her son, my stepson, Tony. And both doors would fly open, the front and back, and something would go through the cabin so quickly you couldn't even see it. And then you'd get up and put on an oil lamp because there was no electricity, and some meat or some food would be missing. And there's all kinds of stories about the cable car. Like if you go hunting or fishing on their land and without their permission, like your whole family will get diarrhea for 3 days. You'll get sick. And so they have this sort of aura about them. It might sound a bit cheesy, you might start thinking about Dances with Wolves with Kevin Costner, or Thunderheart with Val Kilmer. Oh, the old trope about the wise magical native. It's not a trope, and you can't really understand it until you meet real natives. Okay. And so then we talked about a bunch of other stuff too. I told Carla some of my stories and some of the things I'd seen the natives do, and the duende and all of these things. And then Carla opened up more, and she said, "Yeah, her boyfriend Ben is also very well known amongst the Kabakar, especially Kabakar who leave reserve. Because, like, what happens is some people will leave the reserve and they'll just go out into the world and do remarkable things, like get a master's degree or a PhD or something. And you just go, man, that dude was born in a dirt floor roundhouse in the jungle. He left when he was 18 and he's like 34 now and he's got a PhD. How does that happen? And it's just part of the mystery of the Kabakar. And Ben and Carla, they know a lot of these. I call them bridge natives, meaning they can bridge the world they were born in with the world we live in. And Carla has sat in on some conversations with these guys and Ben where they start talking about what the Kabakar could do. And I mean, um, it's Harry Potter, man. It's that school in Harry Potter. I mean, they can disappear, they can do all kinds of stuff. And so after this conversation with Carla this afternoon, I started doing what I always do. And what I'll do is I'll start to think about people and I'll start to sort of put them on a pedestal. Like, wow, these are exceptional people. These are very special people. These are very evolved people. I mean, they get by with simple clothes and simple rudiments and simple tools, and they cook on fire, and they live in houses they construct from material in the jungle like bamboo and banana leaf, and they look completely primitive, and they're awkward around technology, but at the same time, they can do all this incredible shit that sounds like it's crazy to a rational Westerner. And then a little voice came in and said, "Why do you always do this, Bruce? Why do you always, when you experience something like that, why do you categorize it as special?" And then I started to contemplate it. Now, contemplation isn't really thinking. Contemplation is, it's kind of like you just go into a stupor and you go, huh, right? And you start to contemplate it. It's in the back of your head. You go and make yourself some lunch, you make a thermos of coffee, but you're always kind of on and off thinking about it all day. And then I remembered my Landed Man podcasts, and then the adjustment that my contemplative mind was trying to make in my perspective is that there's nothing special about the Kabakar. What they do is natural for human beings. The unnatural thing here is us. We are the most unnatural thing on the planet now, right? And all of our natural multidimensional consciousness that comes from living in nature, living simply, not interacting with distracting or mind controlling technology. Which brings me back to the Alan Watt, Jordan Maxwell, Frederick Blackburn, and all these books I've been working on. And they all say the same thing. They all talk about not Jordan Maxwell so much, but Alan Watt and Frederick. They talk about television, why it was invented, what the CIA did. It's mind boggling. And what becomes abundantly clear is how dumbed down we are as human beings. And this has been done deliberately. It's absolutely been done deliberately. And it was interesting, to go through Jordan Maxwell and Alan Watt, and and the Bill Cooper book as well. So these, and what I noticed is like a lot of these guys did their work in the 90s. Like Bill Cooper was big in the 90s. He was dead shortly after 9/11 because he would not stop talking about it, and they killed him. He probably could have saved himself if he just surrendered to the police. Sometimes that you get too paranoid and you just go crazy, right? Police are trained to do things. And if you don't respond, just like this lady in Minnesota, if you don't do in a crisis situation where there's danger and there's protesters and there's moving vehicles, do what the police tell you to do. Because their job doesn't matter. They don't care who's right or wrong in the protest. You know, they're just going to do their job. So a lot of this work I've done, with Alan Watt, with Jordan Maxwell, and with Bill Cooper, it's very, very retrospective. I'm looking back like 30 years to 1995, at which time I would have been about just the same age or a year older than my son is now. It's funny how time works. And I remember engaging that stuff, in the early 2000s. And I remember my initial reaction to it, It was kind of my initial reaction to what my wife was telling me about the cable car 8 years ago. And now I look at this work by Cooper and Maxwell and Watt, and I go, man, they saw it all 30 years ago. And everything they said is coming true. Everything. And still nobody listens to them, despite the fact they're batting 1,000. It's amazing. It truly is absolutely amazing. So I had a moment of self-awareness as well in this afternoon contemplation. I realized that I'm tying a lot of things together in a way that those guys didn't do when they did their work, not because they couldn't. It was just there was no necessity for them to think about it. But in 30 years later, we think because of our physical, political, and social environment changes, we new prompts or new questions come to our consciousness that didn't occur to Cooper or Maxwell. And they knew each other as well. And and it was about the real magic behind the compassionate society, which is the biggest load of bullshit ever, an expression coined by Pierre Trudeau. It's just a complete and utter load of bullshit. Compassionate society. You can have compassionate people in a society, but you cannot have a compassionate society because compassion is something only a sentient being can express. Compassion is almost always spontaneous, by the way. If it's manufactured by the mind, it's virtue signaling. If any of you have been wondering what that expression means, and Jordan Maxwell uses it and other people use it, that's what it means. It means it's a sentiment. It's the concept of a feeling, not the actual feeling in your heart center. And there's a big difference. Compassion is where your heart is just moved. You pass 10 homeless people a day if you live in Seattle. Ah, poor bastard, he probably shouldn't have started drugs, none of my bit. But then you just see that one person and you stop thinking, you go, oh, fuck, and you give her $5. I mean, she might have a dog or something that just, it, your heart suddenly takes over. That's compassion. You can't manufacture it. You can't teach a society. You can't entrain a society to be compassionate. But what I'm getting at here is the deeper magic of the money system, of the birth certificate. Now, Jordan covers this stuff phenomenally, explaining admiralty law and everything. But he never closed the loop because Jordan had no experience with people like the Kabakar. He'd never seen it. Now, Jordan could tell you everything about the system we're living in. But what he didn't tell us was what are the natural capabilities of a human being who accepts full responsibility for their lives and lives in nature and doesn't take handouts. And every aspect of the survival of a human being is taken on by a small group of 1,000 or 2,000 people, the Kabakar, and they form a society. And their society is 10,000 years old. Well, what happens is you realize that magic and the power of human consciousness to transform reality is as natural to a human being as swimming is to a fish. You don't have to learn it. You don't have to join the Freemasons. You don't have to become a Kabbalist. Magic and the power of consciousness are natural to us. The handout system, the birth certificate system, the we're going to control everything in your life system strips us of our magic because our connection from the land is taken away. We don't work with the land anymore. Nobody works with the land anymore. You ever ask yourself why farmers never want to quit farming, even though the average workday is 14 hours and they work 7 days a week? Why they don't want to give it up? Because they create a spiritual bond with the land and the animals. And they have a completely different reality. And every time somebody decides to live this way, the rational smart aleck in New York or LA or wherever make fun of people like this. Just look at the way country people are treated. Every time in a Hollywood movie, the country person is always the moron. It's Cletus in The Simpsons. It's Daryl and my other brother Daryl. There has never been a movie or a television show that gave a mystical perception of somebody living in the woods, alone or in a small group of people. They're always perceived as crazy, stupid, and dangerous and reckless to themselves, which is what? A reinforcement for the birth certificate system. Don't leave. It's dangerous out there. And bullying people into believing that is a form of mind control too. It's social conditioning. My own ability to work with my reality in a supernatural way has gone through the roof up here. It's gone. I don't talk about it. It's not like I'm walking on water or changing water to wine or anything like that. But it's about the way my life unfolds. It's about my relationship with my animals. Yeah, you have a dog, you have a pet, you live in Melbourne, you live in Sydney. You go to work all day, you come home, you take your dog out for a 30-minute walk. He maybe licks you for a little bit while you sit down and watch Netflix. My guys are with me 24 hours a day. We're, we're like an Inuit dog team. Okay? I know what they think, I know what they want, they can speak. They don't use words, but they intonate in a way that this is what I want, and right? Your ability to interpret and understand reality goes through the roof. It's a completely different life. Like we're all human beings, but no, not really. Not really, right? Now, ideally, I'm not putting native life up on a pedestal. I'm using it as a juxtaposition for what is natural to a human being and what we've lost. That's it. It would be nice if we could find something in the middle, something between the excesses of the modern materialistic society and the utter simplicity of native living in a jungle. A way of living where we can maintain our natural consciousness abilities and build upon them and also materialize some stuff. But we're living in a Kabbalistic Masonic world now, which is a dark and punishing magic. It's a darkness that's over the whole world now. But it's coming to an end because the creator's had his fill of it. No more of this shit. All right, that's my podcast for tonight. I'm going to call it Jungle Man. I'm Bruce McDonald, and this has been the Telemancer Review.